afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, which we're running as part of the GC3B conference and has been titled, Not All About the Money, How Low-Income Countries Can Strengthen Their Cyber Resilience. Now, this session is a knowledge-sharing session, a session that would allow us to discuss best practices and the best way for low-income countries to enhance cyber resilience. Particularly, we are seated here today to share the dynamics of strengthening cyber resilience for low-income countries through public-private partnerships. So that the main objective of this session is to particularly showcase the Togolese model for computer emergency response team establishment under a public-private partnership with a security operations corporation without investing too much financial resources and also not particularly requiring a sovereign guarantee, which is a great dynamics when you think about cyber resilience, cyber security. So the Togolese CERT was launched in February 2021, and this partnership with the SOC has thrived, thereby portraying how national CERTs and SOC operationalization under a public-private partnership model can be enhanced and can thrive to provide a high-quality cybersecurity service. And this afternoon, I'm joined by a very distinguished panel to throw light on this public-private partnership initiative and this approach to ensuring cyber resilience through public-private partnership. Firstly, I'm joined by Commander Gbota of the Togo National Cybersecurity Agency, ANCy. Commander Gwaliba is the Director General of ANCy, which was established in 2019. And of course, he's the first to occupy that seat. He has also been the head of the institution, and that institution has been responsible for the protection of Togolese cyberspace since it was established. He's also commanded the unit responsible for maintaining the communications infrastructure of the Togolese armed forces. And as the first director of ANCy, he strives with determination to ensure that the institution remains a national key stakeholder for the protection of the Togolese cyberspace. We are also joined by Simon Melchior. He knows I find it hard to pronounce the surname. Simon is the co-founder and managing director of Cyber Defense Africa. And that is the joint venture between the Republic of Togo and the ASECO Group, providing cybersecurity services in Togo and beyond its borders. CDA has a security operations center, a SOC, and a computer emergency response team that operates the Togo CERT. We also have Souleymane Toure, who is the managing director of Ecobank Togo. He is currently not just the managing director of Ecobank Togo, which is the first affiliate of Ecobank Transnational Incorporated. He has also held various positions at Ecobank Group headquarters, including the head of strategy and the head of performance management. Now, prior to that, previously, he has also worked at Morgan Stanley in New York, USA, and he rose to the level of executive director. And he has also headed other large positions and organizations. We also have Anat, Lewin, who we know is the global lead digital safeguards of the World Bank. She has been covering cybersecurity and data protection, and she leads a team of professionals working on policy advice, analytical research, and investment lending activities in cybersecurity, data protection, and data governance, as well as advising developing country governments on cybersecurity good practices, institutional governance frameworks, technical and operational capacity building, and digital skills and awareness raising programs. So we would go quickly into the panel to start discussions. We would have a first round of questions, a second round, and then of course we would open the floor to questions and to comments, and the panelists will also respond. And of course, not because he's a commander, I'm going to start with him, particularly because of the role he occupies. So Commander Gwaliba, I'll come to you to help us set the scene. And one particular thing I would want you to do is remind us about the regulatory framework that was actually put in place before Togo started this initiative, partnership with CERT, and started the Cyber Defense Africa project.
Okay, thank you, Nnenna. Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to apologize for my English. As you know, we are coming from a French-speaking country, and we are making efforts to speak English. Okay. First of all, I think everything started with a vision. The highest authorities of our country analyzed that our country is not a white country. It's not a small country. It's not a white country. As you know, every country has its realities. And as we want to establish an efficient and sustainable ecosystem of cybersecurity, we want to make something innovative, and it is in this objective we establish a framework which can allow our country to establish a cybersecurity ecosystem in which the public and the private can work together to enhance the capacity building of our country. And we started in 2018 with the law, the cybersecurity and cybercrime fighting law. And after this law, the government took a lot of decrees. The first was the decree for creation of ANCy, which is the National Authority of Cybersecurity, which will deal with the framework, regulatory, control, audit, sanction, etc. Another decree was the creation of Cyber Defense Africa. As you know, at the beginning, they take a decree for this. And another decree to establish what we call essential services operators, as you know, as a critical infrastructures. Because our country, as you know, in certain domain, we have 1 or 2 or 3 companies that are very important for the country. And then we have to protect them. Otherwise, if they are targeted, the country will face a situation, a critical situation. And after these decrees, a concept or what you call a contract of a delegation of services, very complete and very detailed, was established between the ANCy and the CDA to delegate them some duties of concerning the operational aspects. I think the Director Simon will speak it when he will take the floor. And this is the global framework we put on the table before looking for the money, financing, etc., before establish this ecosystem of cybersecurity.
Thank you so much. It's interesting to see how a country has systematically used these laws purposely, to further public-private partnership, how consistently they've been decreased per time, and particularly the need to establish an agency, an authority that oversees cyber security, and which is quite different from what you see in African countries that center authorization on the National Security Advisor's Office. Simon, I'll come to you. The panel says it's not all about the money, but normally when we talk about cyber capacity building, we talk about the money, and Anat would support me on that. So it says it's not all about the money. What is this about? Can you discuss the main achievements of the Cyber Defense Africa since the project started and how this relates to financial issues as well?
Thank you, Nnenna. It's also my pleasure to be here. Good afternoon to all. Well, it's not all about the money, but I can see we have 2 banks on the panel here. So maybe they will. I will tell you what it is not about in terms of not the money, and I'll leave the money aspect to my co-panelists. Now, and it also reminds me actually, my father's saying that money is important when you don't have it, but when you have it, then money is not important. So actually, when you have very limited financial resources, which was our case in Togo, we had to be extremely innovative and to think really hard how to, first of all, create the market, right? Since the public administration, the state, the government didn't have really the capex to invest in operationalizing the CERT and SOC. And we knew that we had to borrow money to do it. So how do we create the market that will generate the revenues to repay the loan, because of course we want to repay our loan, okay? That's why we played the economies of scale between the SOC and the CERT. CDA has a contract of delegation of public service with our regulator, ANCy, whereby for 10 years, for a limited period of time, we operate this national CERT on behalf of ANCy. And we also build a SOC, okay? So we, so to speak, have the private sector, the commercial SOC customers subsidize the non-for-profit, activities of the national CERT. And we use, of course, the same equipment. At the beginning, it was the same team. We started with a team of about 10 technicians in Togo. Now we're over 40 people 3 years later. And essentially, that's how we built up the synergies and economies of scale between the CERT and the SOC. I don't want to go into too much details. Maybe when we answer questions, I'll be welcome to maybe shed some light on some of those aspects. In terms of the achievements, what I can say is we created CDA in September 2019, so now it's over 4 years. First, the Togolese Republic invested 2 million euros in increasing the capital of CDA. ASECO brought 1 million euros, so together we had 3 million euros of shareholder capital paid up. And then we borrowed 7 million for 7 years from Ecobank Togo in December 2019. We started the project in January 2020. And we launched the SOC. We first launched the SOC before launching the CERT. Because we had certain procedures, etc., and a whole communication campaign to do for the CERT, which took us a bit longer. So the SOC was operational in September 2020. We all remember COVID, actually. And so we only had 2 weeks delay on the Gantt chart for the beginning of the project, which is a really major achievement for both the guys in Poland and the Togolese team. We had to re-engineer the project and to pre-install the servers, network servers, system servers in Poland before delivery to Togo. The Togolese expert actually did themselves the whole installations with the remote assistance from the guys in Poland, which also accelerated the transfer of knowledge, and now they are the ones maintaining the equipment, so they are much more able to do that than if they had just been trained by the other colleagues. We really had to, find ways, as during and after COVID, digital services were becoming more and more important. We knew that we had to, to deliver on time, and so we were able to do that. And what I can say now, so it's been 3 years since the SOC has been running. We had 2021, 1.6 million euros of revenues, 2022, 2.2. Now we're in September 2023. We have already achieved 82%. I checked just before the panel. We achieved 2.8 million, around 82% of our budget. So we should be on budget this year, and we've been repaying our loan. We already repaid half of the loan to Ecobank Togo. Actually, that's the main goal of the company, is just to operate, to have good quality service, cheap service, and perennial, to have sustainability. And sustainability for us means we first repay our bank, not to be in default, and to continue our operations. So far so good, and the sky's the limit. Now we look beyond Togo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And one thing I've heard, even if it's unsaid, is the beauty of multi-stakeholder approach, because then you see that it's not just the government and the SOC, but then the bank in itself, but above all, the dynamics of trust. It's impressive that, Souleymane is sitting next to you and you're saying we're repaying our loan and the support is coming. So trust is therefore essential on the basis of a multi-stakeholder approach, and that's an important term issue to factor in when we discuss cyber resilience, even in low-income countries. I would come to you, Souleymane. Ecobank, of course, like Simon has said, has financed the project to the tune of over 7 million euros over 7 years. You financed a green field service company without any sizable tangible assets as security, and even without Togo's sovereign guarantee or corporate guarantee from the minority shareholder ASECO, which is, you know, amazing. And to think of the fact that this is money, but then it shows some faith in cybersecurity. How did you do it? Why did you do it? What has been your experience now, almost 4 years later?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. Good afternoon, all. It's a pleasure for us to be here today. Yes, indeed, as Simon said, we are his banker, but I think Simon is more than a customer for me. So as I would develop, you would get to understand why. But this type of financing arrangements, it is a first of its kind in the sub-region. It is also a first of its kind for Ecobank, the Ecobank group. On my very first day, when I became the managing director of Ecobank Togo, the first credit application that came to my desk was to finance the setup of a structure called Cyber Defense Africa. I looked at it, and in over 28, 30 years of career in banking, I've never seen anything as complex as this. Because it's had several risk factors that were completely outside our comfort zone. So because we do have risk appetite. A lot of times, people say bankers don't want to give us credit. No, it's not that. It's not that. If a transaction is highly profitable, but the banker cannot quantify the risk, cannot find mitigants to those risks, even if the return is 20, 30, 40%, he or she won't go in. This complexity of the transactions really pushed us to look at things differently. Because, yes, it's not all about the money, believe it or not. So we saw a massive opportunity for Togo. We believed in the mandates, the strategic objective of Cyber Defense Africa. I believe you mentioned trust. And I believe that trust was set up from the get-go. When Simon and we met for the first time, I think some of my colleagues, they told me, DG, you two, how long have you known each other? I said, no, we just met. But then, we had to come up with innovative ways of arranging the transactions in a manner that it will be acceptable to our credit committee, it will be acceptable to our board of directors, but most importantly, it will be acceptable to Cyber Defense Africa, because Simon doesn't like to pay. He doesn't like to pay. But we also understood the constraints, the binding constraints he had. So quickly, and I think as the moderator said, it was a green field. It was a green field with no asset, pretty much with nothing. But we had the strategic ambition, and I think the commander also said it. We had the vision because we believed in that vision of the Togolese government in developing cyber resilience, cyber capabilities. But yes, it was a startup. That was a problem for us. but then the proven expertise and the track record of ASECO data systems. But most importantly, the strategic choice by the Togolese government to use ASECO as the technical partner gave us enough comfort regarding Cyber Defense Africa's ability to successfully carry out this project. So we performed a comprehensive due diligence on ASECO, and the outcome of that due diligence, so we really got comfort on the performance risk, because that's the very first risk that we assessed. So we were comfortable with the risk that we were taking. The second concern that we had related to how do we understand, or how do we structure, or how does Cyber Defense Africa set up its operations in such a way that the revenue generated from the transactions, the cash flow, we can ring fence that. Because at the end of the day, it is that cash flow that will be used to pay the loan. Because, for bankers, for those who are bankers among us in the room, we always looked at the first way out. So for us, we needed to be comfortable with the first way out because there was no asset. There's no second way out. But looking at it, we did get comfortable with it. So then we said, okay, we had a very good understanding of the operations of the business. We had a very good understanding of, the cash flow, and we can ring fence, the cash flow mechanism. So that really gave us comfort in terms of the commercialization risk. So we knew at that point that this is something that we can do. But one important aspect that really, if you need to take one thing from everything I'm saying, one important aspect was the solid commitment by the Togolese authorities to really, come up with a framework that will make the country a leader in logistic hub in the region. Because it's really that framework, as the commander said, that really led to, the governments, the authorities taking measures aimed at improving cyber resilience. And that was clearly part of what we call the Plan National de Développement, the National Development Plan. It was the third act of it. And that really is where everything started. And that framework really led, to also the setup of Cyber Defense Africa. So as, considering all those aspects, so we knew that this is something that can be done. And we did it. The board approved it. Now, 4 years on, it has been performing very well. It has been performing very well, not just, financially, because it's important. It's not just about the money. It has been performing very, very well. The loan is good. Because, Simon and I, we are talking, because, so the loan is good. He has not defaulted on the loan. But where I'm very much, appreciative is really Cyber Defense Africa was able to execute its mandate. Because we can see clearly in Togo the resilience, the capability buildings, like, the commander said. If you come to Togo, you can see it. You can see it. And so not just, the public sector, but even in the private sector. And one thing probably you don't know, Simon is also now auditing me now. I'm not just, his banker. So he audited me just to make sure that I'm compliant with, the cyber, security, laws, rules in Togo. So really for us, that's a game changer for us in Togo, because that's going to make sure that, all the companies, big companies, that they're all operating under the same protocol. And that's where, in Togo, we are going to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Souleymane. Thank you for pointing to the fact that there can be changing dynamics of commercial and financial engineering. And I think the nature of cybersecurity calls us all to that, but also how regulation can be specifically used to enhance public-private partnership. And I come to the World Bank, Anat. How do you see, Mr. Souleymane has talked about this very innovative experience. The commander has also talked about it, and Simon. How do you see this sort of innovative experience, which we've seen with Togo, which is a relatively small, developing, low-income, low-capacity country in the global context? What best practices can we draw from this sort of approach for other similarly developing countries, particularly in the African region?
Thanks very much, Nnenna, and good afternoon to everybody. So Nnenna and I both know that there's a lot of discussion about women in cybersecurity and the sisterhood. So I'm very glad to see a brotherhood in cybersecurity here today on the stage, because we see a very strong partnership between two of the panelists. So that's quite nice. It was actually my colleague Guilain de Salin, who happens to be, I think, in the second to last row. I'm outing him right now. He's waving his hand, who said to me, Anat, there's a very interesting example happening in Togo of a public-private partnership in Togo for the national incident response capacity. Let's look at this in more detail and see what's going on there. And so what started was a discussion to really understand how does this PPP look and whether it is something that's applicable also to other countries. And it is something that the World Bank is quite interested in because we have a situation of low capacity developing countries. So the way that it looks in Africa is there are some countries that really do have a lot of capacity. And they have people who understand cybersecurity. They've got staff, they've got resources. So, you probably all know which those countries are that are more along the leading regional powers when it comes to cybersecurity. And even they need financial resources. And incidentally, it's a very interesting challenge to invite the World Bank to talk about things that don't have to do with money, so challenge accepted. But we also have the countries in Africa that really have nothing. They don't have skilled professionals. They don't have an incident response capacity. They don't have a national cybersecurity team, forget an agency. They're really starting from scratch, from greenfield. They don't have very much. And they also don't have the budget with which to build it. So what do you do in context like this? And, I'm not here to tell you that there's a panacea for, if you're a low-income, low-capacity country, and you don't have money, I'm not here to tell you that there's a miracle solution, because there is no miracle solution. But there are some things that that can contribute to good results that don't necessarily have to do with money. One of them is you need to get your governance right. It's something that, maybe is not something that you've had to deal with directly, but we from the World Bank, we talk to countries about making sure that your governance is right. What we see in some countries, especially in Africa, is that the people who know cyber best in government are not the ones who are empowered. And that the people who are empowered on cybersecurity have no capacity in cybersecurity. And so there needs to be something that's fixed in terms of the governance and the institutional framework. So this goes beyond the regulatory framework and the legal framework of having a law in place. I'm talking about that as well, of course, cybersecurity legislation, cybercrime legislation. These are things that are in and of themselves not very expensive, but they need to get done, and they need to get done well and right, and they need to be in place. But I'm also talking about who has the say over cybersecurity institutionally in the governance structure of that particular country. And what we also see sometimes is that there's infighting between ministers. I mean, I'll call a spade, I will not name any countries. We all know where we come from and the examples of the countries where we are. But cybersecurity is a team sport. It really is something where if you have a weak link in the chain, it's broken. The chain is broken. We all need to work together. So you can't afford in cybersecurity to have one minister not get along with another minister, or to have one head of an agency not get along with the advisor to the head of state, and then for cybersecurity then not to get the funding that it needs because of some interpersonal. So these are things that people just need to cut it out. when it comes to cybersecurity. That is also not very expensive. So getting the governance right is important. We also, I've heard this a million times, I won't dwell on this, but it is a matter of fact that the countries that do well on cybersecurity have high-level championship. It is not a secret. It's probably something that's said over and over, but it is the truth that if you can get your head of state and that person's office to really champion cybersecurity, you're really a step ahead. Products and services in cybersecurity need to be made affordable to low-income countries. This is another challenge that we face. We see cybersecurity companies that offer products and services that are often subscription-based have really high prices. And that's because those products and services are geared for high-income markets, such as USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, etc. And those companies are really producing the products for them. So one of the songs and dances I always do, especially when I'm in fora, when I'm speaking to private sector, is please, private sector, produce products and services that are priced for developing countries. And it can be a no-frills version, and it could be a modular version, and it could be a scaled-up version where somebody starts on a basic level, and then as they increase in capacity, they can move up to a higher level. So they buy the Honda, they don't buy the Cadillac, and the World Bank does not endorse any particular car makers. But there are ways in which the private sector needs to rethink how it makes these products and services available. So then low-capacity countries have options when it comes to technologies that they would like to deploy for incident response. And then public-private partnerships, of course, to round out the circle is another area. Especially low-capacity countries that don't have the ability to build an incident response capacity. And incidentally, we're also looking at PPPs for skills development training. It's something that was covered in the previous session, and it's something that is on our minds as the World Bank. How can we create a PPP around building a cyber academy? How can we create a PPP around training programs for cybersecurity between the government and the private sector? And I don't have all of the answers today. It is something that we're working on and we're having discussions on. But really what we're seeing is some countries simply don't have the ability to build it and to operate it. And that they could really benefit from a private partner to come in, to build it, to operate, to train, and then ultimately to transfer, or maybe not to transfer. It depends on what the model is. In some cases, the private partner continues to operate and to provide the service. And there's a profit-sharing arrangement, and there is a way for the government to get its cut and for the private sector partner to get its cut, and the private sector is then installed. And in some ways, it's perhaps easier to do a PPP for skills development programs for a cyber academy than it is for incident response, which is a little bit more of a sensitive topic. In some countries, it's very sensitive, and they will only work with certain companies that have been pre-approved and that have been vetted. We have this example in some countries where when the World Bank funds a certain procurement and it goes to RFP, only, the government would really like only some pre-vetted companies to be able to bid. And of course, our rules are to have things open to competition, so then you get into a situation where there's some difficulty around that. But PPPs, I think, are a model to really be explored for cybersecurity. Not many have done this. We know the example of Togo for incident response. There's the example of a PPP and cyber capacity building in Dubai. So they have a partnership with Thales, the French company, which is operating their skills training program for cybersecurity. I'm also in the process of learning a bit more, and the gentleman is in the audience who can raise his hand, who has knowledge about the example of Jordan, where there's also a skills capacity building PPP with a private sector partner and in the government of Jordan. So I think this is something that you pioneers are starting. It is a way to help low capacity countries. It needs to be structured right and structured well, and I heard some of you know, everything that you went through to structure your PPP. And I think, you know, PPPs, we've done them a lot in other sectors for energy, for transport. The World Bank has done a lot of PPPs. It's something that we like to do because we want to leverage private sector investment. Rather than just the World Bank providing the financing, we want the private sector to provide the financing. And we are often asked as task team leaders, as project leads at the World Bank, how much private sector money did you leverage? How much private sector money did you bring to the table as part of this project? So we're asked this as one of our KPIs. You know, how much can we bring private partners in? And so I think that we want to explore this for cyber. It gets very complicated also for other sectors. You need to do a demand study oftentimes. The private sector partner expects to see a pretty detailed methodological study of what the demand is. What can they expect to be receiving in terms of income? And then it gets also complicated in other ways. But I'll leave it at that. Those are some first thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anat. I just want to start from the beginning and say yes, extant governance realities would always be reflected in the cybersecurity governance reality. And then I think, indeed, all African countries, not just one, we need to get right the politicization of cybersecurity. And of course, you also highlighted the need for having champions, which actually plays a huge role, affordability. But I also think, which is very important, you also highlighted on that, the need for defining and ensuring sustainability at the beginning, at the emergence of these partnerships. And Togo, like we know, last year, Togo held the first African Heads of State Cybersecurity Summit in Lomé, and then that led to the Lomé Declaration in March 2022. Also, Togo has entered a Memorandum of Understanding, which is another kind of partnership with the UNECA to establish the first African Cybersecurity Center. So those are all emerging great examples from what is happening in Togo. I would open the floor now for questions because we are far behind time. I would be happy to take questions and comments, not just questions, and then I would allow the panelists close with final remarks, and then we end the session this afternoon. So questions, comments? Any questions, comments? Yes, please. Can I take 2-3 questions at once and the panelists will respond? Please, your name as well.
Thank you. So, Sebastian Madden from PGI and Crest. It's a fascinating case study, and I think to see the leverage of both parties working is really wonderful. I think my question relates to quality assurance. How is it that the government side is able to satisfy itself that it is getting a cybersecurity incident response service at the level of quality that is required in a sector which is clearly critically important and, as Anat mentioned, can often be seen as highly, highly sensitive? I'd be very interested to know a little bit of the detail around how you look at that aspect of it. Thank you.
Can I take another question? Any other question? Okay. Would you take that question because it's for the government? How do you ensure quality assurance? Okay.
I will not go in the details of the contract of delegation of service as I was saying, but in this contract, there are SLAs we established, and the ANCy, the authority on which I'm functioning, control very regularly the delivery of Cyber Defense Africa. They have to report me with the time set, the incident, and we check it. And the technical teams of the CDA are Togolese, and they are submitted with the Togo laws of secret defense, everything dealing with the national security aspect. Yes, and then the ANCy very usually control what CDA doing to see if he is respecting the SLAs. And when it's not the case, he gets sanctioned. Yes, it's the reason why when Simon see me coming in the office, he is very correct.
Maybe just also comment on quality. When Souleymane was talking, I actually remember also that before the projects even started, so first, of course, we built a business plan. The business plan was audited. So there was a first commercial audit of the feasibility of the financial feasibility of the financial projections in the business plan by an independent company that the Ministry of Digital Economy of Togo hired then to actually assess the let's say reasonability of our projections that ASECO and built for the joint project. Then also Ecobank Togo had their IT team. So the minister also solicited your IT department to also audit the technical aspect of our deliveries. So if the technical project makes sense from a technical point of view. And also that was also one of the very key factors in the decision of Ecobank that yes, that this was all reasonable and that it made sense and it was not inflated and etc. etc. So these were two very important aspects, but also on quality. Now, we have 43 SLAs in our contract of delegation of public service, and like the commandant has mentioned, if we fail, we can be sanctioned. To give you an example, one of the SLAs for the delivery of the project was that the CERT, the national CERT, becomes within 2 years. So joins first and other teams of CERTs and becomes SIM3 intermediate level after 2 years. We were SIM3 intermediate after the first year with 3 criteria out of 40 some missing, and now of course we're advanced already after that. This was so the CERT launched in February 2021. In 22 we were SIM3 intermediate, and 1 year later at the beginning of this year, summer of this year, we became advanced. So we follow these criteria, these SLA very strictly, and that's a very important aspect, and that's also one of the elements of the PPP, that at the end of the day, public administration, it's not particularly well known for the quality of its service, the quality of service. So to provide a quality service, then it's important to have a technical partner. But the technical partner is not just a technical partner that delivers the projects and goes by, says bye-bye and leaves. It's an investor. So ASECO is interested also for their own, marketing, commercial, communication, etc., in the success of the JV, in the success of the project, to be able to replicate similar projects elsewhere, and for the JV to grow as well beyond Togo. Thank you.
Thank you. And 1 minute, Mr. Souleymane. I think I was going to actually ask about the success, how the CD, and you've answered that. Mr. Souleymane, before you answer that question, what I particularly want you to touch upon, just very briefly, because we're about to close, is in terms of, the question, quality assurance, but particularly, how do you see this sort of success story replicated in other, particularly African countries or developing countries? Is it a possibility? Is it possible that we would have such opportunities and this kind of success story can emanate from it?
Thank you for the questions. I think it's a very important question, especially for those among us in the room who are representing countries' governments. Yes, what was done in Togo can easily be replicated in other African countries. So Togo has developed a template, which by and large we can do copy-paste in other African countries. And I think the commander talked about all the rules, the criteria, and one of the things also that I was impressed in Cyber Defense Africa was also the quality of the people, but most importantly, the vetting process that went in. So you might say, you are a banker, how would you know about, when they're recruiting people? I know because Simon took somebody from me. He took somebody from my team. Not only he came looking for money, but also he took, one of my guys. But that guy went through an extensive due diligence, process. So ANCy really make sure that all the boxes are checked. So yes. So now, when we talked about, cyber security, cyber crime, by its transversal, dimension, it really can be a significant obstacle in for African countries, especially in terms of wealth creation. So we talked about this, extensively this morning, because cybersecurity, cybercrime, it has no boundaries, it has no nationalities, and all the attacks, for instance, in Togo, are not done by Togolese, are done by people maybe thousands of miles, away from Togo. So, and I think really there is a massive opportunity for us, Africans, today, to make sure that we collaborate so that really we allow our businesses to operate under the same, cyber security protocols. So really, we have a unique opportunity to build, capabilities that really, make, our African economies, much more resilient. So yeah, what was done in CDA in Togo can be copy-paste in other countries. And what's even more important, Ecobank, because of our Pan-African dimensions and leveraging what we have done with the CDA in Togo, so we can help, the other governments, the other, private sectors in Africa, really, to come up with a structure, that is similar to what we have done in Togo. But obviously, we can also take into account, some differences, because, countries, might have, differences, but by and large, what was done in Togo, so we can copy Cyber Defense Africa in other African countries.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Souleymane. And finally, Anat, in 1-2 minutes, there's a very important point you raised, and this conversation reminds me of Article 26 of the Malabo Convention, which highlights the importance of public-private partnerships. So it is there in the law, with just the 15 ratifications. You talked about how laws and regulations will not be enough. And in this part of the world, we tend to like policies, laws. How do we move from laws and regulations to advanced and modern operational cybersecurity teams on the ground, even when it's not just all about the money? 1 minute.
Thanks very much. First of all, I'd like to say that I am very impressed by how cool Simon is to sit next to between his financier and the guy with whom he has, 151 service level agreements? 143 service level agreement? No, just 43. Okay. That's still a lot. So, you're between a rock and a hard place, Simon, but you seem to be all cool with it. So, anyway, thanks. Thanks for that. No, but that's how we know everything is kosher. This is how we know. This is how we know it's all good. Absolutely. So, how do we move from the regulations to the implementation? This is very important because a lot of times people in development think that if they just do the regulation, they're done with cybersecurity. I see it over, and I just mentioned it to somebody today who said, why don't we cover cybersecurity under regulation? I said, no, we need to do implementation. The implementation has to happen, whether it is by setting up an incident response capacity or setting up a national cybersecurity agency, and that agency then does risk management. You need to do everything from really building your CERT, your SOC. You need to create a situation whereby a fresh cohort of cybersecurity analysts gets created in that country on a regular basis, because they will grow, they will get better salaries elsewhere, they will leave public sector, they will leave you because they're going to have better opportunities the more they are trained and experienced. So you constantly need to create new cybersecurity analysts into your system. So how do you implement this? By focusing on incident response, by focusing on risk management, by focusing on skills development, by really investing in your ecosystem, in your industry development locally. And by creating, it doesn't have to initially be a cybersecurity agency, a standalone agency, the way that we see it in Ghana or Rwanda, for instance. It can even be just a strong team. In some countries, that team can be within the telecom regulator, because sometimes that's where that's where it is. In some countries, it is within the national IT agency, the government IT agency. In some cases, it's just with the ministry. And oftentimes, this is how it starts. And it can, in the future, evolve into a standalone agency if the stars align. But really, all I can say is it's very important to move past regulation, to move towards implementation, and then to measure your results as well, to make sure that you have looked at what your KPIs are and that everything that you're doing aligns with your strategy that you set out in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anat. And I just want to thank everyone. We've come to the end of the session. Absolutely huge learning for me. So much dynamics in terms of what partnership for cybersecurity should look like. Actually, this also shows aspects of informal partnerships rather than a particular approach to partnership in the way we see it. We've seen how the dynamics of friendship, how the dynamics of trust can play out in terms of building up partnerships for cyber security. And that, I think, ended it absolutely clearly that in all of this, we also need to measure our results. I don't think partnership can be cast in stone. There is no formula in particular. And then I think for particularly developing countries, we need to move beyond what the laws are necessarily saying and find other working approaches. But also in terms of partnerships, I think governments have to be willing. Governments in parts of Africa are particularly very skeptical to deal with private organizations. It's been a huge challenge. So it's great to see what ANCy is doing is a huge example. Even though that, the SOC in itself is a private entity, it's also impressive to see a bank like Ecobank agree to such formalities. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. We're very grateful. It's been great to have you listen and hear all we had to say. Thank you, Anat, Lewin. Thank you, Souleymane, Toure, Simon, Melchior, and of course, Commander Gwaliba. It's nice to have you. Thank you so much. And thanks to myself as well for moderating this amazing panel. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you very much.